A really exciting key enhancement this year is our database redevelopment. This project has been in the pipeline for a number of years now for sheep genetics, and it will be launched as part of our enhancements for 2022. So who is impacted by this change? All our evaluations, maternal, terminal, merino, kid plan, Dooney and Sam will all be impacted by this change. What does this change actually mean? We will see changes in ASBVs as a result, and breeders will now be able to access results following an analysis via the website rather than via an email and PDFs. So firstly, why undertake a database redevelopment? We know that there's been significant improvements in technology since the inception of sheep genetics back in 2005, and prior to that when we had Land Plan. So if we think about even in our own businesses, our computers, our mobile phones, our internet connectivity, all of those things have changed dramatically since 2005. So the database redevelopment was commissioned to bring sheep genetics along and update our systems so that we are using the best available technology and database infrastructure for our growing genetic evaluations. We also need to make sure our systems are more serviceable, so the language support and code behind our databases is currently serviceable by most graduates and most people working in IT. So we needed to make sure that we're able to take our evaluation forward and we make it more serviceable so we can make frequent, easy updates ongoing rather than having to wait another 15 years before another big database redevelopment occurs. The database redevelopment offers an opportunity to integrate our database with other industry databases like the NLIS system. And we're starting to see more individual carcass feedback being provided, as well as new data sources that weren't possible 15, 20 years ago coming online. So our database redevelopment has put our sheep genetics databases alongside other industry databases. So in the future, we're able to find new sources of information to drive and underpin our genetic evaluation. We also need to make sure our evaluations are able to cope with the growing amounts of data being submitted, not only from these new data sources and on-farm data submitted by breeders, but also genomic information. The graph on the bottom right-hand corner of the slide indicates the current size of our genomic database in the blue bar, and the red line indicates how that's expected to grow exponentially over the next 10 years, just because of the sheer scale and size of genomic information. So we need to make sure that we've got systems that are scalable with that, with those increasing data demands for genomic testing, and as breeders continue to adopt this technology. The database redevelopment also provides an opportunity for on-the-fly feedback of data submission. So as breeders, when you submit data, you often get limited feedback about the type of information that was included in the file that you sent across until the evaluations run. So you could have a lag time of up to 2 weeks before you actually find out what data was included in the databases. The new database redevelopment with the improved import logic will actually be able to provide breeders and service providers that are submitting data to sheep genetics with feedback on the information that's contained in that file. So if there are any issues, you can fix it on the day of submission and make sure that the right data is sent off to evaluation to create breeding values. The redevelopment also allows us to update the logic that we use behind what data gets included. So it provided an opportunity for us to sit back, review that logic and make sure that we update that so that the best possible data, again, is being sent to evaluation. So to recap the actual redevelopment process, and this is important to understand when it comes to why we might see some changes in the way things are done and the way we report breeding values. So we started off with our different Merino Select, Land Plan and research databases, which had all been developed by different people and existed in different systems. And we consolidated all of those different databases into a single data warehouse where Merino Select data alongside Land Plan data is now all housed together. Once we had the data warehouse established, we had to develop a way of getting data into that data warehouse from your on-farm software. So a new way of submitting data into the data warehouse, and that's where that feedback mechanism I spoke of earlier occurs. Finally, once we had the data warehouse established, we actually had to get the data submitted from breeders and researchers out of the data warehouse and sent off to analysis, where we turn the cogs to create the breeding values that you report back. So that was the main step, and we'll talk a little bit more later about this step of getting data out of the warehouse and to evaluation, and that's generally why we see changes in breeding values, because of the improvement of the logic in this step. And finally, I spoke about improved reporting. Going forward from our enhancements this year, breeders will be able to access reports that are customizable and printable via the Sheep Genetics search site. So you'll receive an email when the analysis is complete, directing you to log in and access your new set of reports. So this includes genetic trends on the traits that you want to see that are important to your business. As well as part of that, going into the website through a single login to access the download for you to import into your software, so you can have breeding values in your software when you're in the yards, etc. I'll hand over to Emma now to talk through reasons that we might see breeding values change.
Thanks, Peter. The database redevelopment has given us the opportunity to review the way we handle the data you're collecting. So this has allowed us to ensure we're doing the best job of describing the genetic merit of your animals with the data provided. So this does mean that we're going to see breeding value movement when we move to this new database. And there are several key reasons for these changes, most of which are coming into play when we package up your data and send it to OVIS for evaluation. So we're just going to spend some time now going through each of these reasons. So the first is that we've reviewed the business rules around which animals we include in each run and whether their breed and performance data is also included. So every run has a specific breed list that tells us what to include in each or what's relevant to each analysis. We then include all the back pedigree on these animals, and we also include all progeny from relevant ewes, just as pedigree, so that we can calculate reproduction traits on these ewes. An example of this would be if you had a terminal ewe you were using, say, in a maternal flock, we're still getting reproduction information on that ewe. The second reason for change is that we've reviewed our data filtering procedures. So previously, the Lamb Plan and Merino Select evaluations were quite independent, and there were differences in the way that the data was validated for those evaluations. The redevelopment has given us the opportunity to review these exclusion rules. So the first thing that's allowed us to do is make sure that the exclusions that we have in place are relevant to current and future industry. And secondly, it's allowed us to provide more consistency between our different evaluations. We've also updated the way that we handle age stages. So currently, breeders supply a measurement with an age stage, so let's say a yearling weight. In the new database, we take that measurement and we will be storing it based on the age of measurement. So we'll use the date of birth of the animal and the measurement date. What this allows us to do is that we can have harder limits around the age of animals within a stage. So what you can see in the graphs at the bottom of the screen, in the graph to the left, there's a fair bit of overlap in the colours between which are representing different age stages. In the graph to the right, however, though, is the new database, and what we see is there is a lot less overlap in the number of records being overlapped between age stages. So ultimately what this means is that we'll be doing a better job of applying genetic parameters to your records. So things like better application of heritabilities and correlations, making sure we're using the most relevant parameters based on when this animal was recorded. So we've shared these age stages, these revised age stage ranges with softwares. and we'll be sharing them with breeders too. For breeders, the key thing to remember is just to make sure that you're recording the traits you're interested in when the average of the group fits within the age range you're trying to target in your breeding objective. So the fourth reason we'll see changes in breeding values is that we have improved the way we build carcass files. Previously, kill traits like meat science and eating quality were treated in a management group that reflected their kill group. And this worked really well historically, where most of our kill data was coming from research flocks, where, often ewes were AI'd, lambed down together, and those lambs were run together through to the abattoir. However, we've had an increase in the amount of breeder data being collected through projects like satellite flocks, and that meant we needed to update the way we handled this kill data to account for their on-farm management and management grouping of animals prior to being killed. So the new database is going to do a better job of bringing this on-farm information and kill information together, so that we're using the lifetime contemporary grouping of these animals and better accounting for on-farm and environmental differences on carcass traits. Finally, we'll also see a change in the number of contemporary groups used in the analysis, with a general increase across the board. And that increase is driven by all those changes I've already discussed, particularly with the age stage updates and our carcass grouping changes. But also we're doing a better job or a more consistent job of using dates of measurement when we're splitting up your management groups into different contemporary groups. So just for everyone's information, if you have a single management group but you record them over 2 days, we actually split those animals based on their date of measurement. And the reason that we do that is for traits like weight traits, where we want to make sure that those that were recorded on the second day, they could have been in the yards overnight. So we want to make sure that we're not directly comparing them to the first day of weighing. That split in date of measurement is less applicable for traits like your fleece traits, or say your visual traits like, you're getting a marking breech score. So for breeders, it's just really important to take into account or keep in mind the date of measurement you're submitting to us, as we do split your management groups up based on that date of measurement. So all of these improvements impact the way we handle your data, and they will impact your breeding values. So in terms of what this breeding value movement actually looks like, what we're looking at here is we've got the industry trends for indexes across the top of the screen. What we actually see is that the trends stay relatively similar at an industry level. Sort of at the second level there, we've got scatter plots. And what this is showing is that if we compare the old and the new database, generally speaking, the top animals stay the top, the bottom animals stay the bottom, and we just see re-ranking through those middle animals. On those graphs too, we've also got a correlation there, so we can see that, it's quite a higher correlation on the index between the old and the new. So we're not expecting a huge amount of re-ranking in terms of indexes with our new database. So across the board, we see our carcass and eating quality traits like IMF and shear force impacted or changed most in our new database, and that's because we've changed the way that we're dealing with the lifetime grouping for those traits. We will also see changes in fat, muscle, and fibre diameter in merinos. So in summary, our database redevelopment is going to impact all evaluations. And this is going to include a change in breeding values. So it'll be really important once these breeding values are available to make sure you go check them out, but also check them out and check out the new percentile tables so that you understand what the changes in breeding values actually mean. And it will also change the way that we access results.